Hello, welcome to Swole Center, and today I have a tier list. This one is on the things holding you back as a novice lifter, specifically for skinny guys, which also known as hardgainers or ectomorphs. As a former twig, I believe I am in a good place to discuss this topic. Now, here lies the question, what is a novice lifter? Commonly, that is defined by using strength standards. For instance, if you can overhead press 135, bench press 225, squat 315, and deadlift 405, a lot of people would consider you to be out of the novice phase and thus an intermediate lifter. I would like to go further into this point by stating that a novice lifter is so new that they have the ability to have linear progression. They can often keep going, adding +5 to the bar every week or every few weeks depending on the lift, or 20 pounds depending on the lift. And they can do so without really intelligently rewiring their program. They can just follow a basic program and do this. That is when I would consider, you're still in the novice phase. In other words, you haven't milked out all of your newbie gains yet. When you have, meaning all gains are halted, you can't reliably add weight to the bar. You are not getting significantly bigger within weeks, all while assuming a proper diet and training program. You may be considered an intermediate lifter. With that being said, a lot of novices fail to be on the proper program/lifestyle and stall before making it to the intermediate status. Hence this tier list. So without further ado, let's introduce the tiers. First up, we got S tier. If you fall victim to something here, you are screwed. Something is in A tier, also the same, except it might not obviously be as dramatic as S tier. Something is in B tier, probably is holding you back, it might be, but you should consider this after considering the things in S and A tier. This is like a secondary thing. C tier, it's not really holding you back, kind of self-explanatory. And D tier is something that is definitely not holding you back, or most likely not holding you back, and it's so bad at holding you back, it might be for your own good that it's in your life. You'll see what I mean later on. So now, let's get into the tier lists. At number 1, we have dehydration. Where do you think this will go? It is in S tier. If you are dehydrated, you are nerfing yourself so hard. Water is 75% of skeletal muscle. And the second point I want to make is that it is crucial for brain and body function. It is mandatory for survival. Anything that is mandatory for survival, if you are lacking in it, the secondary things like putting on muscle and things you think that are cool, your body is going to push those off to the side and focus on what it needs to as the bare minimum for its survival. So make sure you are well hydrated. Usually I'd recommend a gallon a day, but it also depends on a lot of factors, muscle mass, body weight, etc., and activity levels and, climate, how sweaty you are. Number 2 is overtraining. This one is going to go here. And one of the reasons why it's not really holding most people back, I believe, is that most novices, it's not that they're overtraining, it's that they're under-recovering. So that's why if you feel burnt out or whatever and you're a novice, you can't be blaming your training program if you're, for instance, not eating right or barely sleeping, as I'll get to later in this video. Most novices, as another point, are so weak that systemic fatigue is not as much of an issue. Undertraining is a bigger problem than overtraining in this phase. Most people aren't training enough, I would say, especially in the novice phase, which is what this is about. And some novices do not train hard. If you're not training hard and you're not conditioned to training hard, yeah, maybe just adding another 2 to 3 sets, it might not do you a disservice. Now, if you're training harder and harder and harder, then yeah, you're gonna not be able to train with as much volume overall by default. But, find what works for you, which, as you'll see, goes well with this list here. Number 3, not having standardized form. I actually want to go to this one because we'll get to this one later. This is in A tier. And what do I mean by standardized form? We'll use an example as the bench press. One complete rep of the bench press, one might add, is holding the bar at lockout, bringing it down, under control, touching the chest, pausing for 1 second, pressing the bar up, and then locking it all the way out. Let's say you use that as your standard bench press form, and you make all your reps for all your sets of your working sets looking like that. That is very simple to log into whatever logbook you have, or to keep in mind, right? That you did this, so next week, add another 5 pounds, or do another rep, or maybe add one more set. There's different ways of progressing like that, and by standardizing your form, you take a whole lot out of the equation. Like, you don't have to worry about, well, did I have more control so it made it harder so I couldn't do as much weight, or blah blah blah. So standardized form, I think, for novices is simple because you really don't need to overcomplicate stuff in this phase. You're going to progress pretty quickly either way. Number 4, we have no ultra deep stretch. So this is like the extreme of form, right? That's why I wanted to put this one next. Believe it or not, you might think it's going to go in C tier, but it's going to go in B tier. It might be holding you back, especially on some lifts where you can't really feel your muscles. It might help to find a variation of that exercise that gets you a fuller range of motion. In fact, the stretched position is usually indicative of more gains made, and more tension is usually found in the stretched position, meaning it is more difficult there, on the muscle that is. But the reason why it's in B tier is that once you have standardized form, you got like 90% of the benefits from doing the sets. So, this is like a secondary issue to solve. You should still consider it, but it's not a top priority. Number 5 is lack of supplements. This is overall. Some of them I would put in B tier, but most of them I'm going to put in C tier. Lack of supplements is kind of like, if you're looking for all the latest ones and stuff, more often than not, they're costly. There's not that much research backing them up. And they're probably low return on investment stuff. Like, you're paying so much to get a supplement that's giving you 0.1% of your results. Like, that's not really worth it. Next, we have stress. That goes in A tier. I was tempted to put it in S tier, but these things are extreme. So it definitely deserves A tier, though. Stress is definitely destroying you pretty badly. Enough negative chronic stress will certainly lower testosterone and energy. Cortisol competes with testosterone for binding sites, in fact, if you want to get scientific. So, yeah, chronically high cortisol will destroy your gains. And lack of sleep is the next one. S tier. Lack of sleep will destroy you. It crushes testosterone levels and energy. And recovery, the foundation of recovery is sleep. That's where most of your recovery happens. The next one is Being sedentary. Now this list is mainly for skinny guys / hard gainers. So, like, if this video was about overweight individuals, I think I would rank it pretty high up. I'm still going to put it in B tier though, because assuming that you're still eating enough to be in maintenance at the very least, if not a surplus, being active is not really going to hurt you unless you're so active that it interferes with your ability to perform hard sets in the gym. Being sedentary is not good for your health, and being active is gonna boost your, obviously your NEAT, and it's also gonna allow you to bulk harder without getting excessively fat too quickly. Which leads me to the next one. Scared of bulking. If you are scared to bulk, you're destroying your progress. You need more bricks to build a bigger house. Main gaining, which is basically also known as recomping to most people, although the definition is a little bit sketchy. This can work well for a while, especially if you're a complete novice. You can gain decently, but if you're skinny-ish and want to have gains to the next level, bulking is necessary, especially down the road. You're gonna have to bulk at some point if you want to be really genuinely jacked. And like, a lot of people would look at someone and be like, yeah, well, that's my dream physique. And let's say you weigh 120 pounds. You're probably thinking, yeah, if I can recomp, get some nice cut lean abs like him and build a little bit of muscle, then I'm going to look like him. But you're 120 pounds or so and he's like 180, 190. How do you think you're going to get there? You got to bulk. Number 10 is not using RPE. Most novice lifters think they train harder than they actually do. So, well, let's get into what RPE is. It stands for rate of perceived exertion. So this is how hard you look like / you think you are training in proportion to failure. And RPE is like, so most novices, as I said, they think they're training harder than they actually do, and they are better off training sets to failure, because once again, systemic fatigue is not a huge issue yet. Most novices are so weak that they're already getting enough stimulus while using very little weight in comparison to experienced lifters. So, D tier. It might actually be for your own good that you don't use RPE. Next is not using RIR, and that is reps in reserve. So this one was not using RPE. This is not using RIR. This RIR I think is a little bit better for novices, but it's not really holding you back if you're not using this. Once again, it's better if you train to failure. RIR, by the way, is reps in reserve, so that's more of a tangible thing. It's not really perceived. Still is a little bit, because you can change your strength slightly week to week, so it can fluctuate. So your RIR on day 1 might not be your RIR of the next day that you train that muscle with the same exercise, etc., etc. But it's not necessarily a bad tool for experienced lifters, but novice lifters, I say they should train to failure safely, of course, or at least train hard. You should be like really exerting yourself. So I wouldn't worry about this holding you back. The next one is not getting enough protein. Now, not getting enough protein, if you're genuinely deficient in it, that would destroy your progress. But most people who get into this fitness space, they already get a sense of how important protein is, and most people have the urge to get protein products and stuff I'm going to put it in B tier because it might be holding you back. You should consider your protein as a standalone, right? Bulking in general, it's definitely going to hold you back. Obviously, I would consider whole foods, clean eating. I'm not going to tell you to dirty bulk. I think that for most people can be a bad idea. But protein, that's where we're at now. That is not holding you back, really. Obviously, if you're getting enough. If it is, I want to put it in A or S tier, but it's just so many people are just like advertising protein and stuff. Maybe I should have made it high quality protein and then that would go in A tier, but if this is just protein, I'm going to put it in B tier. Number 14 is no pumps. If you can get... Oh wait, my bad. We're going to do squatting first. Not squatting. This is A tier. And I kind of grouped a few things in this label of not squatting. As you can see, that's Tom Platz right there. Not squatting is that I'm including not hitting legs, first of all. That is really wrecking your progress. Especially if you're someone who cares about building mass in general. If you're a calisthenics athlete, then yeah, you can get away with not training legs. You're going to master skills, one would argue, more easily without having big legs. But if you're genuinely wanting to get big and strong, yeah, you should be training your legs. That's one of them. Legs are like, they're the biggest muscles, generally speaking, in the body. They carry the potential for a lot of muscle and power output. They balance a nice classic looking physique. And also, the other thing that this involves with the not squatting category is basic compounds. Basic heavyweight compound movements. Free weight barbell. Squat, bench, deadlift, that kind of thing. They are the most productive for novices, especially squatting and deadlifting. Squatting really is one of the most productive lifts for adding slabs of muscle to your bones. Now we get on to not getting sick pumps in the gym. This is B tier actually. I was tempted in putting this in A tier. I'm going to leave it in B tier for now. This is also for novices. You can definitely make it out of the novice phase without really getting good at getting a pump in the gym. That being said, long-term progress, I think the pump is very important. It not only pumps blood and oxygen in the muscles, but with that blood comes nutrients, which will feed the muscles. That's partly why the pump would happen in the first place. So yeah, B tier I think is an appropriate ranking for this. Next up we have not having a gym bro. This one is also in B tier. It might be holding you back, especially if you're afraid. As you can see here, this picture we have Will Tennyson spotting Jesse James West on bench press. That could be holding you back if let's say you're doing this and you're afraid to go to failure on bench press and you don't have anyone to spot you. Well, you might leave a few reps in the tank. So it could definitely helps with discipline, motivation in general, especially if they're a good guy to bring to the gym, in and out of the gym, whatever. Next up we have low testosterone. This, for natties, of course. This list in general is for natties. That's S tier. Most of the A and S tier items help boost T in natty men. So it kind of makes sense that it's up here. Like, if you have low T, especially low T symptoms, you're probably lacking in most of these things. Next up we have machine hopping per muscle. I'm going to put this in B tier. That might be holding you back. And it would be holding you back if you just completely lack effort on all your sets. You're just trying to feel out each muscle at the expense of intensity. Yeah, that would be holding you back. But simply just doing more work with different exercises, as long as you're training hard as a novice, it's probably not holding you back. That being said, if you take it to the extreme, maybe I should put it in C tier. You know what? I'm going to drop it. Yeah, C tier. But then again, many people just waste many hours. You know what? B tier. Screw it. B tier. Next up, we have getting sick. This is A tier. The reason why getting sick is A tier is because it is really bad. It crushes your T levels temporarily. Assuming most sicknesses that go away on their own. Sabotages recovery with that. Obviously, your body has to use its resources to fight off the sickness instead of building muscle. And the reason why it's not S tier is at least it is usually short term. So, with that being said, the next one is getting injured. This is also an A tier threat. Yes. Also, this, per muscle, this is really bad. As a whole body thing, you can still, train muscles that are not where the injury is. So if you injure your ankle, might have to stop training calves. For most of you, probably aren't even training your calves, so you wouldn't even really care. But, you could still bench, I guess, or do bicep curls, with the advice and consent of your doctor, of course. Next up, we have this is going to be a controversy. Bad friends / family. And the reason why it is all the way up here in the A tier is because they can have a meaningful control over your life if you let them. And this, keep in mind, this is bad. They're just friends and family in general, no, not a bad thing, right? They're just there, they're supportive. But if your friends don't want you to improve, and they go oh, why don't you go out with me tonight? You skip meals, you're missing out on recovery. You skip multiple gym sessions in a row. That. Are they really your friends? No. You gotta pick a side. Yes, it may seem selfish, but hey, that's the price to pay to make progress. Next, we have yes, we have fapping. Where do you think this goes? Take a wild guess. It's not here. It's not here. It's not any of these. It's C. Yes. The only reason why it's really not here is just because there's nothing really good or bad about it as far as physically goes. Now, yeah, there's arguments to be made about, spiritual and moral reasons why you should or shouldn't do it. That's not what this is about. This is physical, and there is no notable change in gains, testosterone, strength, energy, at least any significant amount long term. So whether you decide to fap or do no fap, neither is really better for gains. So I guess you do you when it comes to this. Next up, we have ego. So ego lifting could be that's one thing. I'm grouping two things into this one. One is an ego that's too big, or an ego that's too small. So, an ego that's too big, right? Well, you got the picture here that kind of describes it. You're just putting on more weight at the expense of actually getting a training stimulus in, and or getting stronger in a set standardized form / range of motion. This is, it greatly puts you at a much higher risk of injury. It grows you less too, unless and then there's context, right? There's some like lifts, such as like rack pulls, where you do kind of want to look like you're ego lifting. But in general, this is describing the unnecessary adage of weight to just show off, really. Now, the opposite side of this coin is an ego that's too small. An ego that's too small is like whenever you're scared to lift something. A lot of people, especially who are new to the gym, are scared to deadlift, right? So they're like, well, it's a risky exercise, I could hurt my back, whatever. So if they even get around to doing it, sometimes some people will, they'll just try to, like, let's say it's squat, for example, they'll just put on a bunch of weight and do quarter reps to suffice their ego. Other people will put on weight so light, it's not enough to actually, they'll just train like very easy. They're not going to train hard. They're going to put on very little amount of weight. That's an ego that's too small. You have to believe in yourself somewhat. You have to be a little bit delusional when you get under a big squat or you're about to pull a big deadlift. You have to, fake it till you make it, and then make it. For this, I'm going to put ego in A tier. Because whether your ego is too big or too little, if you let it take control of you, it will definitely hold you back. The next one is not bloat maxing. Well, most of you don't even have to worry about bloat maxing because you're naturally skinny. Bloat maxing is C tier. You don't need to get this, like, 30+% body fat to see meaningful growth. A lot of you guys can do it while being sub 20%. If you really want to like leverage max your way into like a huge bench press, or you want to go down that road, then by all means, you do you. But you really don't have to go that far into. Usually it's going to be a dirty bulk if you're going to get that big and fat, but yeah, it's unnecessary to make meaningful progress, and certainly unnecessary to make it out of the novice phase. Next up, we have, what is this one? Oh yeah, bad exercise selection. This one goes in B tier. It might hold you back. And there is meaningful difference between small or big movements. So on a per muscle basis, right, as you can see, the example here is like triceps. Let's say you're doing cable pushdowns versus skull crushers. As long as you're feeling the muscle well, you can get a pump or whatever. Your muscle gets sore, you can progress by weight. The key signs that you're making gains and your triceps are actually getting bigger and stronger, then yeah, that's good. It is picking and choosing between them for the sake of, well, this one is slightly different joint angles. It's very minuscule, especially at the novice phase. So in that sense, that would be a C tier. But at the same time, those differences that I mentioned in how you can get a pump and how you can feel the muscle, how you can progress by weight, those would all be closer to A tier with how important they are. So for that, I'm going to put it in B tier. Also, if we're going just exercise based, For most novices, there is a huge difference between how much stimulus you can get between compounds and isolation work. And compounds are far more productive as your base builder. Once you make the novice gains, pretty much, and you're an intermediate lifter, then you can really start taking advantage of those isolation movements. That's about it. Like, the isolation is important once you become more advanced, because the compounds become more systemically fatiguing because you're stronger. Next up, we have, let me see which one this is. Not enough intensity. Obviously, I'm choosing Tom Platz because he was known for going all out in the gym. Where am I going to put this? So, not enough intensity. This is tough. I'm going to put it in A tier. Not enough intensity can really hold you back. This is why I also recommend, most things as a novice should be pushed to failure. Obviously, warm up and, you can cool down if you'd like, but the working sets themselves push to failure. That's really going to help you. If this was for intermediates, I'd probably still keep it here, but for different reasons. I might make a tier list video on that, honestly. Finally, we have a bad diet. This one is, we're going to make this at the top. We're going to make this the top of S tier. That is like the single most important thing. Maybe hydration is. The second most important thing is your diet. I mean, do I really have to explain this one? Your diet is... It's what makes you up. It's you are what you eat, You eat crap food, you're going to have crap energy, low testosterone, low energy. Your performance is going to suck. Your strength is not going to go up as meaningfully as it could be. And that wraps up our list. So, hopefully, can make another one on this. And I'll see you later. Peace out.